to the BuiltOnAir podcast, the variety show for all things Airtable. Each episode, we cover 4 different segments. It's always fresh and different and lots of fun while you get the insider info on all things Airtable. Our hosts and guests are some of the most senior experts in the Airtable community. Join us live each week on our YouTube channel every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern and join our active community at BuiltOnAir.com/join. Before we begin, a word from our sponsor, OnToAir.com. Any business running on Airtable gets the value that Airtable has, but also needs a few more functions to complete their operations. That's where OnToAir comes in. It's a suite of tools for any business running on Airtable to maximize your operations efficiencies and automations. One customer, John, states that OnToAir enables his business to function properly without having to think about building their own software, and that is pretty invaluable. The OnToAir Airtable apps are amazing, and we use them often and are very happy with the results. So join John and hundreds more customers and take your Airtable to the next level with OnToAir. Sign up today with promo code BuiltOnAir for a 10% discount. Check them out at OnToAir.com. And now let's check out today's episode and see what we built on air.
Not happy with the thing.
All right, we're going live here. Welcome to the BuiltOnAir podcast, season 13, episode 3. Good to be with you this Tuesday morning. We've got a full house today. Myself, Camille, Alli, and special guest Jen. Welcome, Jen.
Thanks for having me.
Good to have you back. Jen's been on a few times in the past. Always good to have you on. And Jen's going to be sharing some cool stuff with us later in the show. So I'll walk through what we're going to be talking about today. As always, it's roughly an hour-long show where we go through different segments and help you stay up to date on Airtable. We always start with our round the bases and talk about what's going on, what's new, and what people are talking about. And then a spotlight on OnToAir, our primary sponsor. And then we will have Jen walk through automations and how she uses Bitlinks within Airtable and reporting and cool stuff on that front. And then we will have Alli show us some hacks in interfaces and how to use buttons to make your interfaces even better. And then a quick shout out to how to join our community. And then finally, Camille will walk through some scripting and using JSON for all of your fields and whatnot. So cool stuff there. All right, starting off with our around the bases. A few things happening, not a ton, still kind of quiet, I think, with the new year, but there was a big announcement from Airtable, from Fred at Airtable, and it's finally happened. They've been talking about this change coming, but they put a date for API keys to expire. So essentially 1 year from now, the end of next January, the API keys that we've used for any kind of integrations, those will no longer exist, and they're being replaced with either OAuth or personal access tokens. So thoughts on that announcement?
Fun. Well, I'm sure I'm going to be annoyed when I have to replace things, but overall, I think it's supposed to let you have finer control over each implementation's access rights. So right now you have one API key for your whole account. And so I have access to all of my clients' bases, including my bases. Well, if I need to implement, like build them a portal or something, I don't want to put my API key in there because then they could like just use my portfolio for whatever because they have access to it. So it's a good idea. And I'm sure I'll be annoyed a year from now.
Yeah. So maybe somebody want to explain what the OAuth is versus the personal access tokens?
I can fumble it.
Yeah. I haven't used OAuth yet. I've done the personal access tokens.
I have not used OAuth yet either, but it's from my understanding. So there are certain platforms that already have authentication that you could tap into. So the most common one I use personally is sign in with your Google account. So instead of making a brand new account for Airtable with my username and password, I just say I'm already logged into Google, use that as my authentication, and then sign me in. OAuth is a service that allows you to sort of bridge the gap between a top level authenticator and then whatever your app or service is, I think.
Yep.
Sounds right.
Yay.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Yep. So yeah, the big difference is you can put scope around both OAuth and personal access tokens where you can lock it down to one base, or even now, the cool thing is you can actually lock it to a workspace. So if you have a workspace, you can only give access to that workspace. Whereas before you only had one key and it gave access to everything that you had access to. So from a security standpoint, it's good. The main difference from OAuth is, it's more user-driven, interface-driven. You have to just click the button to give them access instead of pasting in a key. So the personal access tokens are really pretty much kind of like the API keys, but with more granular control. But they kind of work the same way where you'd have to copy it and paste it in. But you can create multiple. So that's another good thing. So you can have a key for each third-party service that you wanted to use, except you're not supposed to use personal access tokens for third-party integrations. They're supposed to implement OAuth. So that's something we're working on at OnToAir to get that working. There's a couple things I don't like about how they implemented OAuth. There's a couple things that I've given them feedback that would be nice. But yeah, in general, it's definitely kind of more the industry standard way of dealing with access to your service. So, but that does mean if you're using Zapier or Make or OnToAir within the next year, there you will have to reconnect your account to Airtable because those keys will stop working. So at some point, we'll be reaching out to our customers, letting them know that they'll need to be upgrading or updating their access. So that will be a pain, like you mentioned, throughout the year.
You don't tell them all at once. You tell them staggered, right?
Yeah. And the main thing, some people are asking, I think Kavan asked in here to kind of clarify, is it okay to use a personal access token for your third party? Now, so don't jump the gun. I would say if you're using Zapier or Make, don't just create a personal access token and put that in there because they're going to implement OAuth. I know they mentioned Zapier is already working on it. I assume Make will by the end of the year as well. And so you're going to have to switch over to OAuth anyways. So it doesn't make sense to do a personal access token unless you want that granular control before they make the change. But, I would say hold off if you're using a major service until they have OAuth ready. So that's my thoughts there. There's some good, so people are asking about Softer and Glide and Stacker. Yeah. All of those are likely going to be, using OAuth by the end of the year. So just hold off.
The hopeful good news is that as an end user of Airtable, you should just be able to click on your 10 emails, one from Glide and one from Zapier and one from Integromat and whatever services that you're using, and just sort of click a link and it'll say, do you want to use, do you want to bind Airtable to whatever it is that you're clicking on? Yes, and then you should be able to go on your merry way. I don't anticipate end users having a whole lot of process that they have to do other than just sort of signing in again. If it's the developers who are going to have the headache if they have external third-party applications like TAM.
Yep. Yeah, the thing that's tough is with OAuth, for security reasons, the token actually expires. So there's a set time when that token will expire. And so the developer on the back end has to be making sure that they're refreshing it to get a new. That's not something the user has to worry about, but it does make it more complicated as the developer to be constantly making sure that you've got the recent one and you refresh it before it expires. Otherwise, you have to go back to the user to get them to re-authenticate. So that can be annoying as a developer. But something we deal with. We integrate with Google Drive and Box and Dropbox, and those all use OAuth, and it's the same thing there. So fun stuff. But yeah, that's a pretty big change. The cool thing, well, the other thing to worry about, if this concept of scoping and giving access, you can also give read-only access or write access. So that's big. The thing you got to make sure of if you're already using a service like Zapier or OnTair or whatever, you need to make sure when you set up this OAuth that you're giving the same permissions that they needed to do whatever you're doing, because it might break your automations or your integrations if you give a smaller scope than what they were relying on before. Or access to a base that they were connecting to. You got to make sure that you give them access to that base in that scope. Otherwise, you might break your integrations.
That makes sense.
Yep. So it's good overall. I wish the thing that any Airtable developers, there's a use case that I would love to implement for our forms, is the ability for like an admin to give access to like onto Air to like one base or a base, and then have like a secondary OAuth process where where you define what you're asking for, what base you're asking for. They don't have that concept. Basically, when you ask somebody for access, they have to decide what base they're giving access to. But there's a use case where an admin wants to say, I want to set up connection for all of my users to this one base. And then any of my users, they don't need to say, specify the base. They just say, yes, I'll let you connect to that base as me. So that's what I really want them to implement with their OAuth. That's the next step.
We'll see.
Right. When you have hundreds of bases.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because like the end users, like a form, if an end user doesn't know they don't have access to the base, or they do, but they don't, really get in there. They don't know what base they need to give access to. And if they don't give access to the right base, then that integration might not work. So that I might jump on their call. That's actually the other thing I was going to mention. There is a call coming up with the developers of Airtable, I believe this Thursday, right?
Yep.
Is it on Thursday?
I believe it is. It's another
Ask you guys don't anything. Have it. You're not looking forward to talking to the Airtable developers? Yeah, there it is. Yeah, Thursday. So that might be one question. I don't know if I'll be able to jump on, but will be interesting to see if they give any insights there. All right, moving on. Going to the BuiltOnAir community, a couple things. So I love the BuiltOnAir community. There's lots of sleuthers in there that are always finding new things that come out from Airtable that Airtable doesn't announce in their own community. So here's one from Rebecca. Notice that if you right click on a cell, there's this new option to add a comment. But it's still just at the record level. This isn't a field specific, even though you right click on a field. So it's just kind of a shortcut to get to the record menu. But that's something new that just appears to have come out.
Yeah, I think
the record's pretty cool. Good.
It would be nice if we could comment on an individual record, because there have been many a time where there'll be 100 fields in a base, and I'm saying, why is this why is this equal 10 instead of 12? And having to scroll through the sometimes very similarly named fields, it's difficult oftentimes to pinpoint exactly what someone's commenting about. So being able to like directly reference a field, even if it just copied the name of the field for you and just put it in the comment, that'd be a good half step. It'd be nice because now we have copy cell URL, which is supposed to take you to exactly the field. So we already know that Airtable has the capability to like zoom in to exactly the record and cell you're referring to. So the comment feature would be nice if it could directly reference it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the comments are on the attachments too, and you can see which attachment they commented on, but it's still not individual cells.
Right.
That's right. Yeah, and do those comments, I was thinking about that, those comments on the attachment they don't show up in the activity stream, do they?
They do. They show up in the comment section.
Oh, they do.
Well, now that they separated it out, it does show up in the comment section. So I have a client that uses like the interfaces, and then they have like internal conversations on the record and let the clients interact on the attachments. So they can just see those attachment comments.
Interesting. Yeah, so they do already have one concept of a cell level comments on the attachments. As long as it could get confusing though, of like, where did I put that comment? Was it on this cell or this record? It could get confusing. So they would definitely need a good UI to show all of them.
That's half the battle for any feature request is what is it going to look like and how do I package this as a button? Because if it's a 10-step process, no one's going to want to do it.
Yeah.
I am rather happy. I like the, I don't know if you might have this as something to go over as well, but how they separated out revision history and comments in the expanded record.
Mm-hmm.
We showed that last week.
Really,
yeah.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good change, I think, because they get lost so easily.
Yeah.
I wish it would default to all activity versus comments, because sometimes you come in and there's a bunch of activity, but there's like no comments. So sometimes it's like I go to the activity first, but I can see where people would want the comments first. So
yeah, a lot of bases are only me, so there are no comments because I know what all the records are, but I need to look at the activity.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. So nice little Easter egg there. One more from the BuiltOnAir community. This one's more developer centric. Florian brought this up. So there's this concept of, so this is kind of similar to the OAuth. Once you have either an OAuth or a personal access token, there's this endpoint that you can call that's who am I, to figure out what user you're connected as. So sometimes as a developer, you have a connection and you just want to get information about the user. In most use cases, the who am I gives more information than just the ID. It would tell you the user's name, email, account information. Airtables is pretty weak in that regard. But they do have this concept of scopes, which is what I talked about, of like access to certain bases or read only or edit access. And you're supposed to be able to get that scope information from it. But it looks like it does not work for OAuth. But it works. Let me see. It works for OAuth, but not personal access tokens. So it doesn't give you that information, which I think is a bug. I think they confirmed it's a bug on Airtable's side. So if you're doing any API development, be aware that scopes does not show up for the personal access tokens as of now. But that's important because you need to know, like, okay, did they only give me read-only access to it? So you need to know that as a developer. All right, last one. This just came out this morning. If you I got an email from Softer. Actually, actually. This is the one I want. So Softer, a huge platform, probably one of the biggest third-party, if not the biggest third-party app that's primarily built on top of Airtable, although they've branched out from Airtable now, but started as Airtable. Looks like they're changing their pricing. So they're increasing their pricing, but they're also moving to keeping track of how many. So now they're separating out visitors from internal users to external users. And I don't know this for sure. My assumption is internal users means people that can actually like modify the app. So kind of more admin type users. And then external users are, people that can just edit or interact with the data, log in to the admin panel, or not the admin panel, but the portal. So these are like portal users. So I believe before they did not, put a cap on how many login users you could have. I think that those were kind of considered same as visitors. So I don't know if any of you are Power Softer users.
I used to have a membership limit. So memberships were the external users who could log in and edit. I think those tiers are the same. The visitors might be something new, but they did have a cap. So you had to was an $80 tier that allowed you to have logged in users that didn't have access to edit the app. It looks like they have more internal users now too. From what it looks like, you have more ability to go in and change it, but it could be. I'm not sure exactly. I saw the email. I just didn't see all the changes, and I was like, "Oh, that sucks."
Yeah.
Especially because they're going to roll out new features to people who get on the new plans, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. Actually, I guess collaborators. So collaborators might be. So they have collaborators and internal users and external users.
That seems like an awful lot of differentiation.
Yeah. So, I'm not sure. That's what Jacob's asking to differentiate. I don't think the email made it clear.
I would say, because you can have multiple people that have access to the account, like you said, to modify internally. Like if I logged into my Softer account and I'm actually editing the app, right? I could have a team of people that are editing that same app. I'm assuming that's what internal or collaborators means. That's very similar to Stacker's pricing as well. They also have odd terminology around that.
So, and it looks like I don't know if they had caps on records per dynamic block. So there's caps there.
I thought they had record caps in general, but not per block.
That's like a list element.
Weird. Well,
like a list.
The problem is too, the number, when you have a editor access on Softer to different fields, no matter what you show in that block, if you show 5 fields in that block, it will open all the records in that base that user can edit when you click on the edit button, regardless of how it's being displayed, which is why I use Ontair a lot, is because there's just all the information. So I don't know if they're trying to add that functionality where you're just showing those 4 or 5 fields in that block, which is why they're differentiating the pricing, or they're differentiating the number of fields in the block. But right now it's everything when you open the record to edit.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to, I know on their roadmap is action buttons, and that's something I'm really looking forward to, because I think that'll clean up the editing experience a lot. You could click a button to update this record, and it opens up in a modal with just the field that you need to touch, which would be great.
Interesting. It's amazing software. I've just been amazed how big they've grown, and they've raised millions, and it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see where they go. They've already now added Google Sheets, and that's where I see these platforms, as they add more and more different data sources, like you can't be the same app that supports all these different endpoints. Like it becomes a very different product. It'll be interesting to see how it evolves. All right, that concludes. Not much else going on in the community, relatively quiet. There is rumblings. I'm not going to announce anything, but if you're in the BuiltOnAir community, you've maybe seen rumblings of maybe something out there. So next week, we're going to have a special announcement. We'll have a guest come on and talk about some other things that are community related. So stay tuned for next week for some big news there. But you've maybe seen some inklings of stuff coming down the pipeline. I've seen some mentions of it in the public BuiltOnAir channel. So there is something going on. We'll announce it next week. Okay, with that, we'll move on to Ontoair, our primary sponsor. It's an all-in-one toolkit to run your business on Airtable. It's a suite of apps that help you do more with your Airtable environment. So if you're running your business on Airtable, you definitely need to check out Ontoair. We have a cool case study featuring Jen Rudd and how she uses Ontoair forms with one of your clients. So thank you for doing that, Jen. But on today, we're going to talk about last week. I gave a sneak peek. I don't know if you saw it, Jen. I know you're anxiously waiting. Thank you for being patient for our logic. I've been promising it for a bit. There's just it's a big undertaking and just working out the final kinks and bugs, but it's there. You see it. We're going live soon. But I'm not going to show that. I showed it last week on last week's video. But another thing that will be coming when we launch with this is one very common use case. I'll go to the base that I have set up is kind of a parent-child relationship. Now, Ontoair, we've kind of pioneered that parent-child relationship within linked fields. We had that from the get-go. That was one of our main use cases when we built our initial integration with JotForm, is being able to have a parent field, drop-down field, and then a child field that was derived based off of what you selected in the parent. So a typical use case is cars. So you have your make, and then once you choose your make, then that determines your model. So we've always had that, kind of mindset, but it was only working with linked records. But sometimes you want that functionality with just single drop-down fields, just like here. So it's pretty common. I see this in a lot of places where you might have a status field, and this has 3 options. But sometimes you want a sub-status. And so it's common to kind of set this up and you have all of your options here. But really, these 3 are only relevant if the status is planning. And then these 2 are only relevant if it's live. And then these are relevant if it's completed. And you just kind of deal with the fact that you just kind of need to know that you shouldn't select, an option that isn't relevant to the parent. And so that's okay. You just kind of deal with this excess noise and hope that you don't get bad data in there. But we wanted to make that a little bit easier. And so we actually built into our select fields this new feature that's coming out soon of a parent mapping that works with, and your parent doesn't have to be a drop-down field. It can actually be a text field or a formula field. And so how that works is you can enable this parent mapping, and then you just select what your parent field is going to be. So if in the simple use case of 2 drop-down fields, I select so you do this on the child field, so the sub-status field in this case, and you set up and you say my parent is the status field, and then we're going to map all of the parent fields and what fields should display on the child field. So you simply select one value from the parent, and then this shows all those child fields. And you say, for this parent of planning, I only want to make these options available. And then for this live one, I'm just going to select these. And then for completed, I'll select these 3, and then you're done. And now you have all your mapping for each of the different parent and child relationships. And then you can also specify if there's no match, do you want to display all of the fields in the child, or no options? So you can kind of play with that. And then now, once you view the field, by default, since I said display no options if there's no match, it won't show anything the sub status until I select on the princess. So now when I select planning, now my option changes to just those planning options that I configured in the mapping. And then if I change this to something else, now it changes to just those options. So very quick way to set up a parent-child relationship between those. Now, if your parent is like a text field, you can actually simply, I can't show that here because I don't have a text field, but you can actually define what your parent mapping value. So if they type in something, then you can then set up what your select fields are. So you can actually build some advanced use cases where if they type this, or if this is contained within the field, so maybe you have an email field, and if their email is this, then these are the options you want to display, things like that. So cool stuff you can build with our parent mapping that is coming soon. I thought I'd share a sneak peek.
That's awesome.
All right, moving on. What's that?
I just said that's
awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a cool feature. All right, Jen, we're moving on to your automation section. There's your screen showing. Awesome. Take it away.
So before we get started, I just want to talk a little bit about, where's my cursor? I have two screens, it's a computer. So AirTips is launching its first course. AirTips is to help consultants and clients get a better experience in building out Airtable. So for consultants, I'm creating the client attraction playbook, which will be a course that's coming out on the 6th. And that's to help consultants learn how to better engage with clients, how to find the right clients for them, and how to figure out how to match the needs of the clients with their skill set. So if you're interested, it's airtips.io. And the first course is launching, but there'll also be some client education, which I hope will also help the consultants, because the clients are better educated when they're engaging. So you can join the community. It's a Slack community similar to BuiltOnAir. And again, the course is launching on the 6th. Very excited about it. So that's my plug for the day. And then, so as a consultant, a lot of times they get really weird, or not weird, but requests for clients to figure out how to automate processes that take a lot of time. So for a client of mine in the entertainment industry, they're a big name. You see them at the bottom of the credits of movies and so forth. They have a lot of marketing that they're doing, and they're using Bitlinks to track the effectiveness of their marketing. So what I did is I created a Bitlink generator directly in Airtable so that it connects to their Bitlink account. They have a paid account, and they can customize the link, both the front half with their little snippet URL, and then also customize the back half. So what I did was I replicated this in my own base. And so basically, the first thing that we do is we name the Bitlink or what the initiative's going to be. So this is just a test. And then in Google Analytics, sometimes you want to track where the link is. So we use UTMs. I don't know what that means in English, but you basically add an extension to the end of the link to track where that link is being placed. So like here we have Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Also, when you're creating in Bitly, if you're trying to use the same URL and you're trying to create different Bitlinks off of it, it won't work, which is why we use source and channel and things like that to append a link to make it more trackable. And then also so you can create customized links based on the channel that you're using or the source and so forth. So here we're picking Facebook. I added the original link, which is just BuiltOnAir. I'm going to add some tags. And then I'm going to add a description. So we're going to add BuiltOnAir community. And I can spell. And then I'm also going to put a back half. So basically a bit link, usually you have like bit.ly/string of letters, which doesn't really work for people, especially if it's not a clickable link, if it's like something you're putting in print and so forth. So sometimes you want to customize the link so it's branded and also is just easier to type out in case people can't click on something. So we're going to call this BuiltOnAir. And basically what I did was in Bitly, I set up a paid account and I have links.airtips.io as the custom front half of my Bitlink. So basically every URL that I create, the front half is the links.airtips.io, which is just a subdomain of my domain. And then I add the back half in Airtable. And then, so I'm going to hit get Bitlink. You're going to see all my junk on the back end to make sure it's running correctly. And you will see that it created that custom Bitlink in Bitly. And so now the client doesn't have to go into Bitly, add the tags, all the things, and then come back in here and keep a tracking of it. And then the next thing that we did is I created a reporting table. So I think Ben and possibly Scott have shown that like you can run an automation on a consistent basis, like once a day, to create a report basically. So the automation is that every week at a certain time, I want to go into that table and find any Bitlinks where they're live. I'm going to find them all. And also another note for Bitly only tracks links for 60 days. So at the end of 60 days, if you keep going past 60 days, eventually it will go to 0 if people aren't clicking after 60 days. So it only tracks for 60 days. So what we've done around that is we've created different buckets in Airtable. Is we have like 60 days, 120 days, and then the automation will say, okay, if we're at day 61, instead of putting the information from the click report into day 6, the 60-day bucket, we put it in the 120-day bucket, so we can see over every 60 days to see the effectiveness over time. And then we kind of like bottom out at a year, just because a lot of the links for that particular client are in print and so forth, so they're longer lasting links. So that was just something that you can't change, even in enterprise and Bitly. It ends at 90 days as the most you can get history for a link click. So you kind of just check the last 60 days each time. Sidebar. And then I create a record in the reporting table where I just link all of those Bitlinks that are live within the last 60 days. And then because the automation then picks up, okay, if anything is added to that report, then it will run the script to get the Bitly tracking. So basically, like I created a link yesterday, and then this morning it found that there was 1 click on it. So this updates every morning for me, Monday through Friday, how many clicks each link got. So now the team doesn't have to leave Airtable to create new links. It gets created in Bitly, and then the information comes back here, and then they have automated reporting. So that was fun.
Love it.
We also do the same thing for MailChimp. So
awesome. Yeah. Cool. So you've done some scripting and automation. Sounds like you're a full-blown programmer now.
Yay!
Yeah. What's funny is I learned JavaScript in college in like 2000s, and then I like didn't use it for like 10 years. So it's like having to dust off, and also like learning the nuances of Airtable scripting. And like now I'm trying to create a Vega Light report, and sometimes you're like, oh, this is so cool, and like look at the cool things I do, and sometimes I'm like, that's stupid. Why is this happening? Why is this not working? But this is like really fun. Like it took a while to like figure out how to structure the script and stuff like that. But like now that like we have it, we can take it from base to base and add it to different initiatives and so forth. So it's really cool that like once you unlock the system, it's really cool like what you can do with scripting. It's just kind of like beating your head against the wall for a while before you get the answer.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think I missed in your automation. I didn't see a scripting step to pull the metrics.
Oh, let me just go ahead and like jury it for you.
Oh, that's it. That's that. There we go.
Yeah, it's like a daily one. So like here's the new one, right? Let me click on it first. I'm trying to look at 2 screens and do the same thing at the same time. Where is the custom Bitlink? Okay, I'm going to click on this one, which is the new one, right? And so you can see the UTM up here. So Dan on the back end of his website will see that there's a UTM for Facebook, right? And so then I'm going to jury rig this and just pretend this one ran, and then I'm going to run the script. Test action. And there you go. You can see the one-click output. And I learned how to, because the clicks come back as an array, I figured out how to turn those numbers, those information from an array to an actual number and then sum those, which was, I was very proud of myself figuring that one out, which I'm sure it's very elementary to most people, but it was super fun to like figure that out. Like, okay, now I got the payload. Here's the information that comes out. How do I transform this into like what I actually need? Like, this is great that there's like 15555. What does that turn into, like an actual number in the output in Airtable?
That's all coding is. It's just, I have a problem, and then a long pause, and then, oh, I could maybe do this, and then another long pause. Maybe if I do it this way, and then there you go. That's coding. It's problem solving.
Yeah, that was like with MailChimp. I spent like an inordinate amount of time trying to figure out how to get the number of like clicks across like all the links in an email. And I was like kept fighting the same report over and over again. And I'm finally like, oh, if I go back up a step to campaigns, the data is there and I can grab it there and get the numbers. So like, because it was like, it would just give you like all the clicks, not the unique clicks. So you had to go to the campaign report to get unique clicks. Whereas like the individual like campaigns, like it was pulling the information incorrectly. So sometimes you have to like, maybe this isn't the right path. Is there another path that will give me that answer too? And it's reading documentation and trying to figure out the logic behind it.
Yeah.
Or the illogicalness.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Jen, and coming on and promoting airtips.io February 6th for that one's geared towards consultants, right? Your first one?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. We will be checking it out. Thank you. Okay, moving on. Next, we've got interfaces with Alli. Share your screen, ready to go.
Awesome. All right. So this is just a cool little hack that I've landed on. And actually, one of my friends came up with half of this. So shout out to Jalen. So on here, I've put together a very, very simple interface that I've got 2 pages on. And both of these pages are just kind of subsets of the same records, right? So I've got vehicle maintenance, which I've got like people submit certain maintenance issues on these vehicles saying like, oh, the motor seized up completely, for example, on a vehicle. But I want to separate those out into different interface pages. But the thing that's really annoying is if I'm on this CV116 and then I flip back to my just vehicle details page, now I'm back up on CV166 instead of on the one that I was before. So I've put together like a little hack that I've adjusted over time, and I'm only going to do kind of half of it right now for the sake of time. But so essentially what I'm going to start by doing is I'm going to copy the URL for each one of my interface pages. And just starting with this one here, if I'm flipping through, if I pay attention to what the URL looks like, you can see that the record ID changes at the end as I'm clicking on different vehicles. So I want to copy this URL. I'm going to go into my base, and I'm going to add a formula field. And I'm going to add, this one's just going to be, that was vehicle details, right? Vehicle details. Yes. Awesome. And I'm just going to get rid of that last part of the URL because that I want to replace dynamically / formulaically with my record ID from the base itself. And so now I have links that'll lead me to that particular page for each of these records. I'm going to repeat that same thing for my other page here. Just copy that link and duplicate this. Side note, cool keyboard shortcut. If you hold Option on a Mac or I think Alt on a PC and move this field over, it duplicates it wherever you want. So that's a little thing I use often.
Amazingly, I've never done that before.
Yeah, me neither.
I love it. It works really well, except for it's moving slowly right now. Also, P.S. I haven't mentioned, but my internet is spotty, so I'm on a hotspot right now. So hopefully everything looks like it's working. So essentially, I'm doing that same exact thing, but with the URL for the vehicle maintenance page. I'm going to delete this extra field. And now I'm going to take it one step further, because I could just kind of stop there and then use my the built-in Airtable element of the button field here to kind of simulate my navigation. However, I don't love I wish they had more options for colors. So I am going to go back into the base and I'm going to add a couple sets of buttons here. Now, the bummer about this is that it does add a lot of extra fields, but it's well worth it because it looks really cool on the other end. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put in.
Go again.
Oh, I'm sorry.
In here.
Yeah, no, with your original fields that you just made, one for vehicle maintenance and one for vehicle details, couldn't those have started as buttons?
They could have. However, I will explain why I didn't do it that way. I'm typing the word button.
I see.
There's a method to this madness. So I'm just going to reference that formula that I made here with my vehicle details button. But here I'm going to make this one say inactive. And here's where things get really cool.
I get it. As soon as you did that, I understand why.
And then I'm going to make a duplicate of that and also say this one's going to be the active one. So instead of my solid red, I'm going to change this to just white background with the red text. And then I'm going to repeat the same thing, but for my vehicle maintenance. And I'm just going to go down the rainbow here. And then let's just change this to something like that. Vehicle maintenance. And finally, flip this just to a white background. And then this one is active. All right. So now that I have my buttons here, I'm going to go back into my interface and to add my buttons down at the bottom here. So I'm on my vehicle details page. So I want to use the vehicle details active button as this button here. And then this is, I can't read what that says, but hopefully that says inactive. Oops. Yeah. Awesome. And now if I go to vehicle maintenance, I'm going to do the opposite. So this is now my active page. And then I want to use vehicle details inactive. And then finally, I'm going to go up here and say, I want to hide this in the navigation. So that way I don't have those navigable pages at the top because they just throw off all the work that I just did and make it not worth it. But now when I publish, this becomes my new navigation. And so if I go down and I'm on CV166 and I click back to vehicle details, now I'm still on CV166 and I can see that I'm on vehicle details because now this button's white. So as I flip between these, and if I had more sets of buttons, it would look even cooler. But this I like so much more than the navigation that Airtable comes with because I can scroll all the way down. And if I'm looking at this vehicle, I want to stay on that vehicle throughout all my sets of interface pages.
Yep.
Lots of cool little things that you can kind of expand on with that. But yeah.
So you and a friend just hanging out Friday night, thinking about interfaces and buttons, and came up with this.
Yeah, like all the kids.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool. And yeah, you could, like Camille said, I could have just started with a button, but then the reason I started with these formulas is because now I only have to update these formulas, these 2 fields, as opposed to all 4 of these or whatever. Yep. If I need to change the URL.
So I do a similar implementation, but I only need 1 button. And so I just put the URL formula in the button. But this is a more advanced implementation where you are replacing the entirety of a navigation bar. And while it does add more fields, it does give you all of the options that, you otherwise wouldn't have had. But,
right.
Here's another request for the button elements in interfaces to have more colors, just because we wouldn't have to do a lot of this nonsense.
Exactly. Yeah. If they only had the same color options, like I hate how limited they are. But yeah, that's about it.
Cool. That's cool.
Basically
creating a new menu system.
Right.
Because if you did the other one, it would just take you to the top, so it doesn't stay on the record, right? So that's awesome.
Yeah,
exactly.
Cool. Thank you, Alli, for showing that hack. That will come in handy. All right, one quick plug for our BuiltOnAir community. If you haven't joined, please join us at builtonair.com/join. Get in. We have a very active Slack community, and we'd love to have you join us. Our goal for this year is to reach 2,000 members. So please join us and tell your friends. Our final segment will be from Camille, talking about some guy named Jason.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
I have talked about before the strange process I've decided upon that feeds both of my websites, my personal portfolio and my business website, which involves using a static site generator called Jekyll. In order to do that, as opposed to using something like WordPress, or we talked about Softer earlier, or my best friend Glide, which would feed data automatically from an Airtable base or some other source, I am, for some reason, committed to using a static site generator, meaning I have to effectively download data from Airtable into a file in my sort of configuration for the site and have it regenerate, and then I upload all those files back to my website using an FTP process. I don't necessarily recommend doing what I do, but I just think it's fun and neat. And in order to do that, the process has changed a couple of different times over the course of me, making this decision to run my site like a madman. But one way or another, I get my information about my website into a JSON file. So JSON is a method of organizing data in a way that's pretty predictable. If you're familiar with JavaScript, you should be somewhat familiar with the structure. It is, in my case, an array of objects, and then each of the keys within my object are linking back to a field in Airtable, with the exception of ID and name. Those are the 2 sort of default properties for any record in Airtable. It looks pretty standard for what you might expect to get out of an Airtable download of file into a JSON format, including a bunch of stuff that I don't actually need, like the color of each of these select options. I don't actually use that information, but I have it just in case. The oddities of my method of making a website in this manner is that because Airtable is no longer allowing permanent publicly accessible attachment links using their attachment fields, I've had to transition into using Google Drive. Well, in order to get Google Drive images to show up the way I want them, I'm going to load really quickly I have a gallery of images on my website. Each gallery image has its own text if you hover over, and also has the same caption below. There's a particular order that these are supposed to show up, and all of that needs to be controlled somehow. And so, getting back into the nonsense, I've had to do a somewhat custom implementation of exporting my information out of Airtable. Hopefully that all makes sense. So I'm using Airtable's sync source for Google Drive. There's a folder that has all of my Google Drive files that are relevant to my portfolio. I've linked each of the files to the appropriate project, and then for each file, I've given it a caption. Then I have, for each file, it has a field that outputs in JSON format the source of the image, so the URL that I could go to just look at the image itself, and then the caption of the image, which again is its own little text field, and then whether or not that image should be the thumbnail for the project. So I want to control which image is the one that, if you're only looking at one image, what image is that? And then I have a roll-up field at my project level that puts this all into one list. Then there are several services that do this. I used a previous service. I think I've shown on the podcast before. It's actually still in this space, but right now I'm using a script that I made that, again, is not necessarily for production purposes, but because I need not just the list of projects in JSON format, they're organized by service. So if I go back to my website, you'll see urban design, teaching, Airtable, podcasting, etc. Each of those is a record in my services table, and each project is linked to the appropriate service. So I need more than one JSON export out of here. So what I've done for the scripting app is made use of the cursor. So I can say, look at whatever table I'm currently looking at. In this case, it's project. Then look at whatever view I'm currently looking at. In this case, it's showcase. And then get all of the records in that view. Unfortunately, in custom extension coding, I would be able to say, get any fields that are currently shown in the view. In scripting, I have to say, get all of the fields in the table or specify each field myself. So lazily, I just said, get all of the table fields. And then I'm doing a loop to export the record that all of the records in this view into the format that I want, with a little bit of customized logic in there. So I know what fields I'm looking at and what fields that I don't want. I don't even want to bother with attachment fields. And I happen to know that I've named all of those fields either files or thumbnails. I also could have done a filter to just remove any field that had the type of multiple attachment links, I believe is what they're called underneath. So I'm saying get all of the fields for whatever table I'm currently looking at, except for any of the attachment ones, and then export out the name of the field plus the whatever value it is for that field, and put it into the format of JSON. And I'm also tacking on the record ID and the record name. That's this bit at the front. Get the ID of the record, get the name of the record, and then get all of the other fields of the record except for attachments, and then put them in the same format. Then I'm doing a lot of nonsense to get it from an object to JSON format. They're very similar, but not quite the same. And then nothing really happens that I see other than it just spits everything out into this really long piece of text, but I just double click it, copy, and paste it back into this file, projects.json. And then this is specific to Jekyll, but I say Jekyll build. It assembles my entire website again, and then I push it back to my website using GitHub. That is a very long and silly process, and it doesn't need to be that way, but it works. And I have the pride in knowing that I've built this monstrosity twice with my bare hands, and that's why I've done it.
There's something to be said for that.
I love it.
Yeah, it's both of my websites are built this way. So my company website that has all of my, the stuff that I sell is built the exact same way. But I've talked about before wanting to look at what is a better overall solution. And although I really like Glide, I would need a higher tier that I feel necessary to pay for to incorporate the login system I use for my company website called Outseta. I need to have custom JavaScript in order for people to use this login form thing that comes up on my website. And so I am testing another service called WeWeb, which is far more complicated, but it allows me to get much closer to the style that I've decided upon for both of my websites. You'll notice that the general vibe of these two websites thus far look almost identical. And that's what I wanted out of a website builder if I were to ever go back into what normal people do. So somewhere down the line for this season, you may see me talk about WeWeb some more as I get further into it.
Cool. All right. Thank you for sharing that, Camille. And working with, JSON is very, very standard use case. It's pretty much everywhere in the coding and scripting environment. So getting familiar with that. And I think Garrett, who's watching, mentioned the integration with Google Drive. That's a nice way to get around the attachment expiring issue, is putting them up on Google Drive. And so that's a good workaround that you've got there.
Yep. Even for the attachment size limit, I think it's like 2 gigabytes or something you get at lower tiers on Airtable. But if you have like video files, for instance, that could get eaten up really quickly. So just storing them somewhere else and then linking to them is just it's pretty helpful once you get it in place.
Yeah. Awesome. Very cool. Well, that concludes today's show. Thank you all for coming. Jen, thank you for joining us. Excited to hear more of what you've got going on. We'll have you back in the future.
Thank you.
All right. We will see everybody next week on next week's episode of the Built on Air podcast. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining today's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to check out our sponsor, ontoair.com, and we will see you next time on the Built on Air podcast.